Good morning. Go ahead and call to order the February 6, 2018 meeting of the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners. Would like to invite the Reverend Dr. Timothy Womack from First Presbyterian Church, who will give us the invocation. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Commissioner Susan Adams, and we will start with a moment of silent reflection for our first responders. Would everyone please rise?
Whether understood as a prayer to the divine for providence, or as a time of meditation and devotion, we turn our focus upon the needs of this county. We begin by giving thanks, for we are blessed to reside here. We are blessed to have leaders who care. We are blessed to have servants who serve so faithfully and well. So we do give thanks for all those who serve us, our commissioners, the staff, the servants in each department, and the volunteer leaders that make our county such a lovely community in which to dwell. We are mindful that we are the inheritors of the leadership of others, and so we pray that we would be part of that great train of leaders who will continue to care for this community. We seek your wisdom, and that it be bestowed upon us as we meet and deliberate. We ask for consensus. We ask for common sense. We ask for leadership based less on partisanship and more on principle. And we seek your providence and your grace so that we can continue to be part of such a lovely and blessed community. Hear these, our prayers and reflections. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, again, Commissioner Slaughter is on duty for the Constitutional Revision Commission. I don't think there's anything on the agenda, but if there does, something does come up that might require some more debate or discussion, I'm going to reserve the right to table that until we have all 5 commissioners here. With that, is there any additions or deletions to the agenda? I do know the county attorney wants to pull one of item 7M for discussion, and then any other changes to the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Adams, second from Commissioner Flesher. All in favor signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? That carries 4-0 with Commissioner Slaughter absent. This next item is a little bit bittersweet. This is a presentation of a proclamation honoring Brian Burkeen on his retirement from Indian River County Board of County Commissioners, Department of Emergency Services, with 29 years of service. And Brian, this truly is bittersweet. I really don't want to do this, quite honestly.
I'll make you do it, though.
I'm asking Dylan to find a loophole where some way you just can't retire. Gosh, your shoes are going to be so big to fill. And I can't tell you how much it means to me, the 11 plus years I've worked with you. What a fantastic job you've done. What a credit, not only to the Emergency Services District, but just to the community and the county in general. You are one of those very, very special folks that have really committed to serve the public. And it really is. Dylan, you sure you haven't found a loophole yet before I read this thing?
Not yet, sir, but I'll continue researching and see if there's
it.
some retroactive provision I can
Feel free to
find.
interrupt me if you find something.
Good luck. Good luck.
So this is a proclamation honoring Brian Shane Burkeen upon his occasional retirement from Indian River County Emergency Services. Whereas Brian Shane Burkeen began his distinguished career in public service with Indian River County as a paramedic on February 1st, 1989. And whereas, through diligent work and demonstrated ability, he advanced through the emergency medical services ranks, becoming a senior paramedic in 1992, the emergency services operations supervisor in 1993, the EMS deputy chief of quality assurances in 1997, and EMS chief in 2001. And whereas in 2006, upon consolidation of the emergency medical services and fire rescue divisions, he was assigned assistant chief status over all emergency medical operations for the Emergency Services Department, where he dedicated his efforts to initiating and fostering high standards of performance, training, and morale of the entire team providing emergency response services to the citizens of Indian River County. And whereas in 2016, he was presented with the Emergency Provider of the Year Award by the Treasure Coast Fire Chiefs Association for serving his county with distinction, for going above and beyond the call of duty in all instances, and for demonstrating a superb level of professionalism throughout his career. And whereas Chief Brian Shane Burkeen retires on February 9th, 2018, in his 29th year of honorable service to the citizens of Indian River County. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County that Brian Shane Burkeen has earned the respect and admiration of not only the frontline responders of the Emergency Services District, but also of the other departments of Indian River County. Whether in day-to-day operations or in the face of an emergency, his leadership and communication skills, combined with his quick wit and good humor, were always admirable and will be greatly missed by his coworkers, his employers, and the citizens he so selflessly served. And be it further proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners and staff that we extend our sincerest wishes for success in all of his future endeavors. Adopted the 6th day of February, 2018, signed by myself as chairman of the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida.
Great. Thank
Brian?
Thank you so much. Had I known you were going to say such nice things about me, I would have retired sooner. Yeah, I was kind of reminiscing the other day about my history here, and I think I've been through a dozen or so county commissioners, a dozen or so ER directors between the two hospitals, 3 county administrators, 2 Department of Emergency Services directors, and but you know, I got one real solid rock, and that's my family. You know, my wife Ginger's here with me today, and my 2 daughters who couldn't be here today, but very solid rocks. You know, I come home and I'd have a bad day, things of that nature, and tell them of a horrific incident that may have occurred in our county that day, and they'd all sit there and say, your day wasn't that bad, was it? You know, other people have worse days than we do. So with that, I'm so excited and humbled that you guys recognize the hard work that the department has done, and that hard work will get you where you need to be in your life. So I thank you all very much for 29 years and 8 days of service. Thank you, guys.
You know, one thing wasn't included on here, but 2 years ago we did have a very tragic incident with one of our battalion chiefs, and that was a springboard for the county to develop a critical incident stress management program for our first responders. And basically, Brian did 99.9% of the work to put that policy in place, to get some of the team to volunteer to be peer supporters, to get the training done, and to implement that. And Brian, again, the work you did on that was awesome. And it's so important for our first responders that we have that program in place now as they go through their day-to-day duties and the things that they have to deal with that none of us want to have to look at. And the fact that you were able to get that program implemented with widespread support by the team and the members, I think speaks volumes about how they feel about you and the respect they have for you and their willingness to commit to that program under your leadership. So again, just kudos to you.
Thank you.
Hope you guys have a great time. I know there's probably some horse events in the future down the road and some travel, but
Maybe one horse event, yeah.
maybe one. Okay. Well, commissioners, anyone else? Commissioner
Mr.
Fletcher.
Chairman, thank you. Wow. Brian,
Commissioner?
it's been a great run. And there's a man that's not far away from you that's going to be feeling the same feeling you're feeling right now. And you said that the chairman said some nice things about you, and certainly did. But the money line was earn the respect and admiration of your peers and the citizens. Because I've worked with you in many different capacities, many different garments. We also worked in the pouring rain, and that was inside the old EOC. But no matter where we were, no matter what you did, you conducted yourself commensurate of an admirable individual who put the citizens first. All other agendas on the side, you took care of the citizen needs and the needs of the men and women who serve to ensure that we have the very best in Indian River County. And for that, I thank you, and it was an absolute distinguished pleasure to work alongside of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner Zork?
Yes, thank you. Congratulations, Brian. Thinking back to that day in the 1980s, that whole, I don't call them the junior class, but it was the new class of service that we had in the county where we started having the medics working along with the old volunteer group. And it's been a pleasure working with you since 1989. And then more recently, you know, we've talked about everything from life pack changeouts to, hey, Med 7's got a headlight out going down the road to, so I've got to get a new number to report those incidental things for. But I know you're going to have a lot of fun coming up. We look forward to following your traveling and your horsing around activities around the country with your kids. And, you know, you've worked long and hard for this. The institutional knowledge that's walking out the door is big shoes to fill. With Tad in the back of the room, will be filling part of those shoes. But, you know, you carried, when the downturn came and positions were cut, you know, just got more and more layered on top of you. And I know that it was stressful enough before, then you added a few other tasks to it, made it even a little bit more challenging. But it was really a pleasure working with you all those 29 years. And good luck on your endeavors. And make sure you come up with that short measuring tape.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Adams?
I just want to say congratulations. It has been a pleasure for me to be able to work with you finally after all these years, and knowing you on the other side in the community and your involvement there has been fantastic. I know there's a lot of things out in Fellsmere that wouldn't have happened if you weren't involved with them. And I've enjoyed watching your family grow and now the grandbaby, and I hope you'll have plenty of time to spend with that little one and enjoy your travels with the horses and all your adventures. And I know we'll be able to catch up on how you're doing and share some fun stories out at breakfast at Marshland.
We'll be there. Thank you all so very much.
Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Brian's a true professional and a wizard at the paramedic business. Saved numerous lives, even heard many accounts of saving some lives, helping some of the doctors out at the ER. But one story that I know of explicitly that I think illustrates Brian's services in 2004 during Hurricane Jean. Overnight, we were in the EOC, and the winds had reached that level when we can't roll engines or ambulances, and a call had come in through 911. And somebody who was suffering some diabetic symptoms, a call came in. We couldn't roll any of the apparatus. Brian grabbed one of the paramedics that was stationing the ESF and the EOC, they went out in one of the Crown Victorias, went and administered medicine to that person. They couldn't transport the person, but by all accounts saved that person's life that night. And so that was just like the commitment to service that's there. So I'll always remember that. And he's, as he mentioned, seen some tough days, but always had a great sense of humor that really brings everybody up around him. So thank you for your service.
Chief King, would you like any comments? Or
Just like to say that Brian's been a big part of the organization for many years, and when we consolidated, Brian was a major piece of that puzzle to pull everybody together. And I'm really going to miss working with Brian. He's a good guy. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one last question. Brian, is it true that you have the only horse trailer with an AED pack inside the door when you...
No.
No? You might should travel with one of those just in case.
No, I'm good, but thank you very much.
A need arrives.
Dylan, have you found that loophole yet?
No, I was just very moved by all the words, and just, Brian, it's been such a pleasure working with you, both for the quality of work you've done, but also the humor that you've brought to the days that we've gotten a chance to work together. I know I haven't worked with you as long as the others on the board, but it's been such a pleasure, and I will certainly miss working with you.
You've been one of my favorite attorneys, so it's good. Good.
Well, Brian, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Gotta bring her up before you take her to breakfast. Oh, I'm sorry. After work? Yeah.
Couple more days on it.
Oh, wait, Brian, I found it.
Well, what's the line from Star Wars? I feel a disturbance in the force now. So.
Yeah.
Moving on, the next item is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of January 9, 2018.
Move approval.
Second?
We have a motion by Commissioner Flesher, second by Commissioner Zork. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 4-0. Information items, just one item I'd like to bring up. We do have a retirement. Marlis Starlipper is retiring from the Department of General Services with 21 years of service. So, Marlis, thank you very much for your years of service to the community. Mr. Reingold, you wanted to bring up item M for discussion.
Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to pull this item for discussion. On Thursday last week, Representative Grawl had received email correspondence from the Florida Department of Transportation in response to a public records request that was made by her and also Senator Mayfield. The emails shed important light on the issue of federal preemption with respect to the regulation of all aboard Florida and also high or higher speed passenger rail. In December, Senator Mayfield had sent a letter to the governor encouraging FDOT to use its authority to immediately address safety issues and concerns. That was followed up in January by a letter from Commissioner O'Brien in which that he had called upon FDOT to investigate safety issues related to AAF and Brightline. And then on January 24th, FDOT had sent a letter to Representative Grawl in response to several questions she had. And I'll simply just read one of the questions and answers in that letter response, both the question from Representative Grawl and the response from FDOT. In that letter, she had specifically asked, does FDOT have the authority to engage in rulemaking with regards to recommendations made by the Federal Railway Administration with regard to intrastate high-speed rail? And the response from FDOT was that the determination of what is preempted under the current existing rail statutes are fact-specific legal conclusions. And in that, they said, due to the federal preemption issue, historically, the department has never looked to independently regulate railroads, only enforce the federal standards, rules, and laws. There's a history of FDOT simply deferring to FRA with regards to All Board Florida, Brightline, high-speed, higher-speed rail, and All Board Florida claiming that regulations that have been proposed in the legislature are preempted to the federal government. Two of the emails released on Thursday make it clear that this issue is not preempted and that FRA is simply looking to FDOT to step up to the plate. In one of the emails from November, I'm just making sure, yep, one of the emails from November from an FRA official, this is from the federal government to FDOT, specifically states, since FDOT has sole, again, I'll say that again, sole regulatory authority to grant the gate layout modifications, whereas FRA can only recommend such action. Resolving this once and for all satisfies both parties. It's twofold. AAF would receive assurance that conducting the necessary changes has regulatory authority approval to do so, and FRA's recommendations would be fulfilled that ensures such locations receive the optimum safety designs possible. And then follow that up with another email from FRA once again, this time actually to All Board Florida itself in January. The FRA official states, it is our expectation that FDOT officials will take serious consideration to FRA's recommended safety measures, in particular to mitigating or eliminating hump profile surfaces, addressing railroad gate orientation at skewed angled approaches, and evaluate for adequate traffic, railroad, preemption, phasing, and queuing. In the past 2 months, there have been 4 fatal incidents and crashes involving passenger trains. This has included the accident in South Carolina this past weekend. It's included the accident that occurred in Virginia last week. It includes the issue and derailment that happened in Washington State in December. I'm not even including the incidents in which people have been hit on the railroad tracks that Brightline operates currently. I'm very worried that such confusion between FRA and the FDOT will only lead to a disaster on the Treasure Coast. FDOT and All Board Florida can no longer stand behind their preemption argument. And I just want to make sure I presented that information today to the board and to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan. Commissioners, any questions of Dylan on this subject? Is it none? Okay. Thank you, Dylan, for that update.
Thank you for allowing me to present that.
That now takes us to the consent agenda. Commissioners, does anybody wish to pull an item for further discussion? I'd like to pull item E. And then is there anyone from the public that wishes to have a consent agenda item pulled for additional discussion? Seeing none?
Move approval as amended.
Second?
We have a motion from Commissioner Flesher, second from Commissioner Zork to approve as amended. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 4-0. Item E is work order for Mostel and Mueller, Victor Hart Senior Complex Drainage Improvement Projects. If the Public Works Director come down, I'd just like him to kind of walk through this a little bit, please.
Is he
Proudly
sporting,
walks
sporting
down.
something today? I can't
I
quite
believe he
see
is.
that.
What is that thing on his head?
Rich Berger, Public Works Director. Yes, I had a gentleman's agreement with Mr. O'Brien and my team lost. So I will wear the Eagles hat today.
So for all of you folks watching at home that have children, this is the evils of gambling, of a once proud Patriots fan is reduced to having to wear an Eagles hat for the day. So.
Still a proud Patriots fan.
There you
But I will pay my debt.
I want to make sure the control room upstairs that we get a good close-up shot
we wanna
of his
just,
hat on the
just stand
camera
there for a
there.
minute, Rich.
Do you have to provide that, or?
No, Rich was in charge of getting his own hat.
Very nice, Rich.
And you don't want to say what the score was again, do you?
Sure. 41-33. We lost.
May you wear it for many years.
Well, Commissioners, I'm good with the item. If anyone wants to make a motion to move it forward.
Glad I could.
Motion to approve?
I got what I wanted out of it, yeah.
Oh, motion to approve, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you. I'll second it myself. Thank you for that presentation, Rich. We
Yes, sir.
certainly enjoyed it.
Anytime.
Wow.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Zork, second by myself to approve item E. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That carries 4-0. So that. There's no constitutional officers, so that now takes us to public items. We have a public hearing. This is a water main extension along 103rd Court from 88th Street to South 89th Street with a portion of blocks E and H, Bureau Lakes Estate subdivisions. And that will be presented by Mr. Burke. Vinny, good morning and welcome.
No hat. No hat for Vinny?
Well,
He didn't bet.
Rich could lend him the hat, maybe.
it was Rich's fault. He was walking around with a Tom Brady jersey last week, so.
Glad I didn't make that bet. For the record, Vincent Burke, Director of Utility Services. Commissioners, this is some information that was presented to the board last night in form of email. We'll get into that. We had a presentation that was based on some of the information that was in the agenda packet. So I'd like to just kind of walk through that information, and then there may be a recommendation change based on some information. And certainly the public hearing is to hear from anybody either for or against the project. So about 10 slides, we're just going to walk you through how we got to this point. Just a quick timeline to date. Back in 2016, staff received a valid petition. We verified the signatures tied to the property appraiser and brought that to the board in early 2017. The board directed staff to prepare the design and a preliminary assessment roll. Fast forward to January of this year, and we did resolutions 1 and 2. Shortly after that, staff mailed out certified letters to all property owners, notifying them of the board direction, notifying them of the proposed assessment, and also the public hearing date today. There was an informational meeting held at the County Utility Department on January 23rd, where we had a couple property owners come to ask questions about the financing, the costs, and the logistics of the assessment project. And here we are today for the public hearing and Resolution 3, which is attached in your backup. So just a quick summary. Commissioner O'Brien, you'd asked if there was a water main on the north side. Indeed, there is a 12-inch water main that does a 90-degree and continues to go north. Our proposed assessment is to tap off that line, come with an isolation valve, and run about 600 feet south with a 6-inch main on the east side of 103rd, terminating at 88th Street on the southern portion of the bottom portion of the screen with the fire hydrant assembly. You'll see the black assessment area for the 9 particular properties that would be benefiting from the water main. So quick analysis, total of 9 benefiting single-family residential parcels. At the time when Resolution 1 and 2 was passed, we had 7 out of 9 in favor of the project, or 78.8%. See slide 12. That'll be my reminder to update the board where we are as of yesterday. Upon adoption of Resolution 3, if indeed that's what happens, staff will apply for 2 permits. One will be to the Department of Environmental Protection, and the other will be to Indian River County Public Works Department for the right-of-way permit. The anticipated schedule, if this does go forward, is to, in February of 2018, work with our labor contractor to get a work authorization. We'd be back to the board. Look to have substantial completion in April. We have to pressure test it, we have to clean the line, we have to disinfect and get the bacteriological samples, submit that to the DEP, do the final completion in May, and then proposed final as-built resolution 4 in June or summer of 2018. So the estimated total project cost for this project is $46,800, which includes construction, surveying, engineering costs, administration, inspection throughout the process. divided by 9 properties, and we have a per parcel cost of $5,200. We have some estimated monthly expenses we'll go into in a little bit, but for years 1 through 5, that is inclusive of the impact fees, the construction cost, and estimated consumption costs, a little over $100, $101.40. After year 5, the impact fee drops off, reduces to $76.87, and after 10 years, $21.72. That's the consumption portion. Again, all of these fees can be paid up front, but we wanted to illustrate some of the hypothetical costs associated with financing. So here it is in tabular form. If you look at this, again, this is for years 1 through 5. This is assuming 5,000 gallons per month. Some residences use less than that, some more. But given our existing rate structure, that would be $21.72 for the consumption portion of the water. The assessment, the $5,200 can be financed for up to 10 years at an interest rate, APR, that is set by the board each January, which is currently at 5%. And that financing cost is $55.15. And then the impact fee, the capacity charge for the water plant and transmission main, is $1,300 currently. That can also be financed, but for 5 years at 5% interest, close to $24.53. So again, years 6 through 10, these are just hypothetical. That impact fee drops off, and you're left with just the assessment for the pipe and the monthly water bill if the owner chooses to connect, and after 10 years, just the consumption if the rates currently stay where they are. There's other one-time fees that's per our normal connection for the meter, deposit, and setting up a new account for the service fee. All the assessment fees are not due until 90 days after Resolution 4, so these fees would not be due until we bring back to the board the final pay for the contract and confirm the resolution. There is a small recording fee with the clerk of court if financing option is chosen. So this recommendation was based on information when the agenda was written, and at the time, the recommendation was to stop me talking and open up the hearing to receive any public input. We would have at the time recommended Resolution 3 for the cost per parcel of $5,200 at each of the 9 benefiting parcels. To allow the property owners to finance those costs for up to 10 years at an interest rate set by the board, which is currently at 5%. And in the past, we have, as a policy, allowed property owners to connect after Resolution 4, but internal discussions with staff, sometimes there's a delay because contractors are busy between getting the final pay and the as-built submitted to us, and when the line is actually cleared for use by the Department of Environmental Protection. So staff would recommend that we change that policy to say if we have all of our pressure tests done, if it's bacteriologically cleared by the DEP, we see no reason why the homeowner should wait if they want to connect when that line is installed before Resolution 4 comes to the board. So here's slide 12. This is some of the update information. I apologize for the small text, and I'll try to describe what's going on for those folks who cannot read it. So on the left-hand side are the names of those 9 property owners, the addresses that are listed next to them, and then at the time we had 7 out of 9 for the original petition. And at that time it was 77.8% in favor, which allowed us to come to the board for Resolutions 1 and 2, which allowed us to move forward to Resolution 3. However, last night, as you know, the board members were emailed by a particular resident to say that there are certain folks that do not want this project due to the cost associated with the project. And from what we've been able to tell, it looks like there are now 4, maybe 5 folks that perhaps are not in favor of the project. Staff was told that due to workloads and other conflicts, some of those property owners may not be able to be here today. But we do have a property owner that's certainly available to voice their concern. We recommend during the public hearing you offer that person the opportunity to have their say and let you know what's going on. So with that being said, certainly available for any questions, and if there are no questions, to open up the public hearing to hear from any folks that are in favor or against the project at this time.
Thank you, Vinny. Commissioners, Commissioner Zork?
Yes, Vinny, on the assessment slide, were properties 8885 and 8886 not included in the study because they had service off of 89th Street?
Yes, they are
currently?
connected currently to that 12-inch main that runs on the north side of the property, so they would not be considered a benefiting property.
Okay.
Yes, good question.
That,
Yes.
okay.
Thank you.
Any other? And then Vinny, you did mention at the south end, there will be a fire hydrant installed, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So that, in addition to the water service, that they'll be getting the fire protection benefit as well?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this point, no further questions of staff. Go ahead and open up the public hearing. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak? If so, please come up. And if you could, please give your name and address for the record, and good morning and welcome.
Hello, thank you. Deirdre Parker, and my address is 8856 103rd Court. And I do have some signatures here that are opposing the project. And one would be William Green, who was part of the original two that didn't vote in favor of it, so I don't know if that's kind of null and void at this point. But then we have myself and my other half, and we have the Lunas, Soila and Jose Luna, that live on 8836 103 Court. And the same thing with we have Kimberly Green, who is also the wife of DJ Whitaker, that lives at 8865 103 Court. So I guess these three signatures that were originally on the petition are now stating we don't want to be a part of that simply because of the cost. And then in addition, I guess, to the two that were not in favor of it.
Okay. Mrs. Parker, would you mind giving those to the county attorney and let him just take a quick look at them, please?
Oh, sure.
If you don't mind. And then, Ms. Parker, just curious, is there any predominant reason why the change for some of these folks, why they have decided that they don't want to go forward with the water project?
Yeah, it's the cost. I mean, when I'm looking at the numbers standing here or sitting here looking at it up there, and I also got a printout, it seems a little absurd that it might be that costly for some people, but we all live on a limited income, I suppose. You know, we're all working out there or retired, and certain people can't really afford that additional amount per month. It feels like it's part of the mortgage now. So it's for the next 10 years, where the water softening equipment that I have, and I can't speak for everybody else in the neighborhood, but mine works perfectly. So it's not a necessary cost as far as I'm concerned. There are many necessary costs to take on monthly, and this is not one of them.
Okay. All righty. And then is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak to this? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing.
I do want to say one thing.
Yeah, sure, please. I didn't mean to rush.
No. I really appreciate what the county utility department did in terms of getting the project underway and getting all the costs together. We were just not aware that it was going to be that much.
Sure, and that's very understandable. It's good. Dylan, did you have something?
Two things. If it's okay, may I can the clerk keep these, or do
Absolutely.
You, okay,
can
great.
Keep those.
Second off, depending on how the board wants to go today, if it decides to give utilities department staff and the county administrator time to kind of sort through this issue, it might be good to open and continue the public hearing so that if we have it again, we don't re-advertise it and just set a date for us to discuss it, but certainly waiting for discussion from the board.
Okay, thank you, Dylan. Just either Dylan or Vinny on our policy on this. We normally like to have 67% of the benefiting parcels in favor of it. And although, Dylan, I believe the ordinance does allow us to move forward without the 67% by vote of the board. We still have an option.
That is correct. The board has always looked to the 67% input from the community, but always under the code, the board has the right to initiate its own water project and do an assessment accordingly.
Okay. And so, commissioners, we've had a couple of these before in the past, and for Commissioner Adams' benefit, my position has always been that I don't like, I think we had one where it was I think it was 64% or something pretty close. But I voted against that just because, I think once you start taking a little bit lower number, it's easy to go lower and lower, and the next thing you really don't have a standard. So, and I certainly appreciate the fact that some of the residents, that this might have come in more costly to them. And even though I do believe it's a very worthwhile investment into your property, I think it'll increase the value of it going forward. And I think the hydrant and the fire protection are significant improvements. I do, understand the fact that an extra $100 a month may be a burden. And so, and I think staff and Vinny, I do appreciate all the work you guys have done in putting this forward and how you've handled this. But from where I'm sitting, I can't move this forward and put this on the folks when we only have less than 50% in favor of it. I know the number is small, so the percentages can get skewed real quickly, but 4 out of 9 just to me isn't enough to move this forward. I don't know where the other commissioners are, but that's kind of my position. And Commissioner Zork?
I have one question, Vinny. When we did the Pinson subdivision off US 1, the numbers on that, to my recollection, were considerably lower per unit than this is. I don't know how they relate to similar scope in terms of length, but was there a particular driver that was making this project cost what it's costing? Is it a mobilization fee for a relatively small project that's throwing it up, or what might be some of the contributing factors?
Well, I think two things. One, in that project we had 15 benefiting parcels. Anytime you have more parcels
Right.
to spread the cost out. Secondarily, this project initially started in 2016. As we know, in public works and utility, we've seen a sharp increase in some of the costs of doing business, not only on the labor side, but material costs have gone up as well. So 2 years sometimes in the construction world is a long period of time. And I think we've seen that in some of the bids that we've gone out for that are coming back a lot higher than initially anticipated. So I think that's part of the reason why the cost has come up. We wanted to make sure that there was a contingency built into this price so that we were covering any unforeseens. Sometimes it happens during the construction process, so there was a higher cost to this project than what we had initially anticipated.
When we did Pinson in-house at the end of the day, correct? Or did we?
Yes, we have a contract with a company that is under contract through this year that allows us, the county, to purchase materials, direct purchase, and then uses the labor contract, Blue Goose Construction, to do the actual equipment. So in some cases, when the bids come too high, we reserve the opportunity to go back to that labor contract as a fail-safe. We've done that on other places where bids have come in higher than expected. We were anticipating perhaps using those, and there are some fixed costs in there, but again, we always want to make sure that we're not undershooting ourselves and going too low, and then having to come back at resolution 4 to let the folks know that there's the higher cost than what we had initially anticipated.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Zork. Commissioner Adams?
Yes, thank you. I too share your concerns. I don't want to move forward a project if people don't want it. I don't think that's what we're here for. I had the opportunity to talk to Ms. Parker yesterday and go over some of the concerns, and I know she's here representing the neighborhood and her community. What I would like to see happen, because this was kind of last minute, is give staff, utilities, the opportunity to reach out to all the people involved in this project. I think they've attempted to do that, but I don't think you've been able to speak to everybody. Just to make sure we have done our due diligence as a commission and give them maybe a week or two to kind of get that done and come back. I know Ms. Parker is representing everybody, but I feel like we should double check with them. Not that I don't Okay. And give them the chance to come back and just confirm all that, and then we can decide at that point. Is, I think, probably the best way to move forward, but I'm open to suggestions.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Commissioner Fleischer.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I concur with that as well, and Ms. Parker, appreciate you bringing the information forward. You may have changed the fate of the community, but by the same token, this is late and breaking news, and I think that we need to take a look at it, and again, it's a long process that utilities have gone through to vet this out, to send correspondence, and I believe that we should have the opportunity to, or give utilities the opportunity to verify, validate, and see if there's anything that else can be done. Again, I'm reminded of a 7-year project up in Sebastian. It took 7 years. It's happening. But then again, if it's too costly, especially when people are getting around that mortgage hurdle, I do agree and want to respect it. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing and allow staff to reassess all of the information available, including the evidence that was submitted today, and then we have this continued on a later date.
Why don't we go ahead and continue this till February 20th?
That
That's
sounds
2
great.
weeks? Okay.
I'd be happy to second that.
Very good. Dylan, is that okay with you, that we continue to the 20th?
Yeah, so what the board will do is the motion essentially would be to defer taking action today and then continue reopening the public hearing and continuing the public hearing until February 20th. And that was a motion from
Commissioner Fleischer, second by Commissioner Adams. We'll go ahead and formally reopen the public hearing. We have a motion to continue the public hearing on this item to the meeting of February 20th, at which point we will reconsider this item after staff has had a chance to reach out to all the property owners. Jason?
And then, Mr. Chairman, the direction we're getting is just to follow up. You know, we basically have a margin of error of 1. We've got 9 properties, so if you have 6 or more, you've got the 66 2/3. Originally, we had 7. Obviously, we're down to 6 with Ms. Parker changing her. So if any of the other property owners, if we end up with 4 or 5 out of 9, obviously staff's recommendation will be to not move forward with the project.
From what I've heard, I think that's the wish of the board, that if we don't have the majority, that we do not wish to push it on them.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it just to provide clarification to
Very
Ms.
good.
Parker. Yep.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on the motion before us? Okay, seeing none. Commissioners, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries 4-0. Thank you, Ms. Parker, for coming out this morning. We appreciate it. Moving to departmental matters under Office of Management and Budget, we have our quarterly budget report. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Michael Smykowski, Indian River County Budget Director. I'm here to present the first quarter budget report for fiscal year 2017-18. Overall, the report's at a glance. Everything is in large part doing quite well. Gas taxes, both the optional sales tax and the half-cent sales tax. Impact fees are up slightly from a year ago. Tourist tax is doing quite well, in part due to aggressive auditing efforts on behalf of the clerk to ensure everyone is paying the taxes due to the county, and franchise fees are also doing well. In terms of the general fund, it reflects a positive variance on the revenue side of, at the far right, of $5.3 million when compared to a year ago. And that's principally a function of the growth in ad valorem, both due to tax roll growth as well as the millage increase that was approved for this fiscal year. And transportation grants also have an impact. It's a timing issue. We had an increase of $1.5 million. That's a function of which quarter that revenue is actually received. On the expense side, we have a net decrease of $2.9 million. Again, due to a timing issue, last year there were actually 4 draws to the constitutional officers in the first quarter. This year, obviously, there were only 3, so that is the principal reduction. In agency expenses, they increased $143,000, primarily for SRA and the additional funding approved by the board, as well as the Children's Services Council expenses based on the board policy direction and the increased funding that was approved in the FY18 budget. For the MSTU fund, which is the unincorporated area of the county, revenues reflect a positive variance of $857,000. Again, the principal increase was ad valorem due to tax roll growth. There was not a change in the millage in FY18, so that grew $547,000 in the first quarter. Electric utility franchise fee has made a nice recovery that increased $101,000. State revenue sharing is up $27,000, and the half-cent sales tax is up $67,000. On the expense side, they reflect an increase of approximately $200,000. Transfers out increased $22,000. Road and bridge increased $30,000 for condemnations and removal of unsafe structures, and county planning is up $35,000. There was an additional position there when compared to the previous fiscal year. Transportation fund. Revenues increased $162,208. Principally a function of transfers in from the general fund and the MSTU fund, which is where this fund gets the bulk of its revenue. We also had some surplus equipment sales, and the fuel tax reimbursement increased $25,000. On the expense side, net change of $342,000, primarily in road and bridge, increasing capital equipment that was purchased, in maintenance of heavy equipment, and that was offset partially by one-time expenses in the stormwater area from last year for the aquatic plant study, and there was a one-time settlement related to Osprey Marsh in the FY17 expenses to date. Emergency services revenues have increased $2.9 million through the first quarter. Again, primarily due to ad valorem increase in both the millage rate and property values. We did add an additional station to improve the level of service in the past year, which was the principal reason for the increase in the millage rate. Charges for services, which are ambulance fees, also increased $315,000. I'll talk about those in more detail shortly. On the expense side, expenses have increased approximately $1.443 million. Automotive expenses, we made payments on the Quint and a brush truck that was over $1 million. Obviously, we added a new station, so salary and benefits have increased, and we added the additional deputy chief position last year, and that was in the budget, obviously, for this year. We've also replaced $122,000 in data processing equipment for the tough books that are used within the ambulances, which are an important part of relaying information to the hospitals during transports. In terms of the enterprise funds, the golf course is reflective of a $122,000 gain this year compared to $208,000 last year. There were 3.5 additional rain days this fiscal year. SWID, you got $8.3 million in net income versus $6.8 last year. You got a revenue increase driven by service assessment increases of almost $600,000 and a decrease in expenses by a reduction in outside services. Utilities, water and sewer revenues are relatively flat when compared to last year. Expenses, operating expenses are up, our overall expenses are up 3.8%, and that's primarily within the operating area. I know they focused heavily on replacing meters and have done some one-time maintenance work, painting at one of the plants and the like. Fleet is showing a gain of $23,668 as compared to a $4,936 loss during the first quarter last year, primarily driven by increased revenue associated with fuel prices and heavy equipment maintenance, and that's offset by partially offset. Obviously, the cost of fuel has gone up. There is a pass-through on fuel to the user departments. The shooting range is showing a loss at this point. Obviously, we're hoping net income should improve with the skeet and trap facility now open, and you're in the heart of the tourist season. Rather than focusing on an individual fund, we typically highlight something. Typically a fund. This year, or this quarter, I'd like to focus on key revenue sources in the ad valorem funds and quasi-ad valorem funds. So in this slide, you have major general fund revenue sources. You see in the chart on the left, shows the breakdown of major general fund revenue sources. Taxes, obviously, is the largest component of that at 62.3%. And other sources is another major source at 25.5%, and the largest component of that is an interfund transfer from the MSTU for law enforcement. So the largest remaining category outside of taxes and other sources is intergovernmental. That's highlighted. It's about $4.5 million and 5.3% of total fund revenues. Obviously, that makes these revenue sources very important to the general fund. The chart on the right then shows the distribution of the $4.5 million across a number of revenue sources, but the lion's share of the revenue in the intergovernmental category is from half-cent sales tax and state revenue sharing. Collectively, they make 83.9% of the $4.5 million. The other components are pari-mutuel replacement revenue. We get some state aid for libraries, the emergency management grant, and then we get some relatively small items for alcoholic beverage licenses, insurance agent licenses, a federal payment, and very minor revenue for health plan facilities. So half-cent sales tax and revenue sharing are very important to the general fund. In addition, I'm going to talk about the unincorporated area general fund. It's much along the same lines. At the far left, the first chart shows the breakdown of major MSTU fund revenues by category totaling some $30.7 million. Obviously, the biggest component of that is taxes, and Then permit fees, the largest category outside of those two is, again, intergovernmental. When you look at the right, intergovernmental makes up 27.2% of MSTU revenues, and it's almost $8.4 million. And of that 8.4 million, if you look at the chart on the right, you see the distribution among sales tax, which is slightly above $6 million. State revenue sharing is $2.2 million. The remaining piece is mobile home licenses. As such, given the large component in the intergovernmental category of half-cent sales tax and revenue sharing, they represent 98.8% of the intergovernmental revenues in this category. So these two revenue sources are critical to both the general fund as well as the unincorporated general fund. And we'll take a little deeper look at current year collections for these two revenue sources. So the half-cent sales tax, this chart shows 4 years of historical revenues, fiscal years 14, 15, 16, and 17. It shows the distributions by month. There is the first area highlighted in yellow is a subtotal year-to-date through the first 2 months of the fiscal year. Due to lag time in the first quarter, we only collected 2 months of revenue before the books closed. Year-to-date revenue, the FY18 actual year-to-date is $1,469,229. It's a variance of $97,652.05 from the prior year, or 7.1% growth. So we are doing well in this category. There is a strong seasonal pattern to this revenue source. If you look at the area in yellow at the very bottom of the chart, through 2 months, the historical revenue stream, in FY14, we collected 14.6% of annual revenues through November. In FY15, it was 14.9. FY16, 15.3. FY17 was 14.5. So you see it is very seasonal, and that's why you just can't divide the budget equally. So roughly 15% of annual revenues are collected through the first 2 months of the year. That would annualize to approximately $9.8 million. The gross budget at 100% is $9.4 million. So at this point, we would be projecting a surplus. That is a good thing. We do tend to budget conservatively, but there is volatility within this revenue source, and it can change. But at this point in time, collections are strong through the first 2 months, and based on historical trends, we would expect that we would close the year slightly with a slight surplus. Last year, we did do slightly better than projected, so we ended the year at $9,431,933. So we would, at this point, again, we're 7.1% above that level. State revenue sharing is another key revenue source, as I've indicated. If you look, there is a very repetitive pattern to this revenue source. If you look in 2014, from October through June, you collected $235,267.08 per month. So you get normal, regular distributions from the state of Florida based on their initial estimates. And then July tends to be the make or break month. You see, in 2014, we got 468,000. In 2015, we received 547,000. The state fiscal year closes at the end of June, so that's where they remit any excess or surplus that would be in their coffers to the counties. That's typically received in the July payment. So again, that is the make or break month. So, and then in August and September, you start with the new updated allotment from the state. In the case in 2014, it jumped from $235,000 to $247,000, and that number is repeated until the following July, where you receive that distribution of any excess amounts. Again, when you look at the seasonal pattern at the very bottom, 22.9% was collected during the first quarter of 2014, 22.3 in 15, 24.1 in 16, and 23.4 in FY17. So about 24% of annual revenues are received through the first quarter. At this point, we're at 883,471. So the variance from the prior year is 4.7%. We would, again, project a slight surplus. At 24%, we would collect just shy of $3.7 million as compared to the gross budget of $3.4 million. But I can also tell you that the July being the make or break, there have been years where you're expecting the big number and it's not a big number. So and it changed over time as well. The state revenue sharing at one point was funded largely with intangibles tax, and then it shifted more to a quasi-sales tax program. So you have a lot of eggs in the sales tax basket, so to speak. So you can't be too aggressive, because if sales tax falters, the revenue sharing component is kind of hand in hand with the sales tax. So you win or lose on two separate revenue sources depending on how the sales tax goes. The transportation fund revenue sources. Chart on the left again shows the major revenue sources. Intergovernmental revenue is a key component. Transportation does not levy a tax, but it's treated with and presented in the budget with the ad valorem funds, because it gets the bulk. The other sources category is largely interfund transfers from the general fund and the unincorporated area, which is how this fund gets the majority of its revenue, with intergovernmental being the strong second, and the other categories are relatively small overall. Of the $2.7 million in the intergovernmental, the two largest are the constitutional gas tax at just over $1.7 million. That's 62% of that category, and the county gas tax at $745,000. We also get some FDOT signal enhancement funds, and we do get some funding from the fuel tax reimbursement as well. So let's take a look at how the two gas taxes are doing year to date. Again, in a similar fashion, this is presented just like the other revenues. You have 4 years of actuals. Again, due to timing lags, you only have 2 months of actual collections to date. Historical revenue stream at the bottom is fairly steady state, 15.9%. It was slightly lower in FY15 at 14.8. And then you see the last 2 years, it's been a little more consistent at 16.2 and 16.8%. Year-to-date collections are up 4.2%. 300 and, our actual is $316,835. Based on the historical pattern, year-to-date revenues would annualize to about $1,866,000 compared to the gross budget that you see at the top of $1,008,000. Gas taxes, obviously, as over time, are more moderate growth. You see, 1,628, 1,674, 1,765, and then $1,813,000 last year. So they tend to grow more moderately, but they are on track. And at this point, looking like we would have a very slight surplus in this category. County gas tax, again, similar presentation format. Year-to-date revenues, $131,000. It's up 2.6% from collections to date from the prior year. The seasonal pattern that you see in the gas taxes is fairly consistent. The last 2 years have been 16%. The 2 years prior to that, 15.7 and 15.9. That would annualize to about $821,000 versus the gross budget of $785. And you see last year we actually collected, we did slightly better than expected, so we ended up at $801,000. So 801 to 821 is very moderate growth. But again, they are on track, and they are keys outside of the interfund transfers that this fund receives. Last fund, the Emergency Services Fund, has total revenues of about $37.5 million. Taxes represent 80.1% of Emergency Service District Fund revenue. ALS charges are about the amended budget at the 95% level is like 5.3 million. The gross is 5.5. That's 14.1% of overall fund revenues. So outside of ad valorem, this is a key for us. Strong collections year to date, they're up $314,000. Our actual is $1,576,000 compared to $1,262,000 a year ago, and that variance is 24.9% to date, which is very strong. This one, though, because there were a lot of transports in one month, does not automatically translate to there will be a like amount or more transports in the following month. But the overall trend is very strong, and this is, like I said, an important source outside of ad valorem that helps meet the revenue budget for this operating fund, and that's a key. We did better than expected last year we were just shy of $5.9 million. There is somewhat of an anomaly. You look at FY16, you collected $5.972 million. But if you look at November of that year, there was some catch up from the prior year, so you had a $750,000 month in November of 2015. Which compared to what a more typical month would be $300,000 to $400,000. And that explains, so the FY16 overall revenue was unusually high. FY15 revenue was low as a result of that kind of catch up in billing from FY15. Overall, we would expect revenues, and I peeked ahead this morning to January. January revenue was down about almost 7%, so like I said, just because you had 1 month with a large number of transports doesn't automatically translate to a like amount of service. Obviously, that's.
Michael, are these charges that have been collected or just invoiced?
No, these are collected.
Thank you.
These are collected. So at this point, annualized revenue based on the year-to-date through 3 months would translate to about $6.2 million. I would guess we'd probably come in closer to the 6, maybe 6.1. Obviously, that is good because that provides some additional revenue outside of ad valorem. And we monitor this closely because, again, outside of the ad valorem being 80%, this is fills the bulk of the remaining gap in the revenue budget for this fund. So this is truly a key revenue source, and that's why I wanted to focus on it. But it looks like we may have some latitude to marginally increase the ALS revenue budget as we head into the FY19 budget. A lot of detail there, but I think it's important, and I wanted you to understand the relationship on the sales tax and the revenue sharing, how they work together, and it's again a key on the revenue sharing when you get that closeout and hope for the best. And for the most part, it has been good, but I remember a few years when you got that clunker that you weren't expecting, and that's the one you hope to avoid. So if there are any questions, that concludes my presentation.
Very
Again,
good.
we're doing well overall year to date. It is early in the fiscal year, but the overall trend pattern is very good.
Looks good.
So,
Great. Thank you, Michael. Any questions? No? Okay, Michael, great.
Thank
yes,
you.
ma'am. Please come up to the podium. And if you'd please provide your name and address for the record.
Sure enough.
Good morning and welcome.
Thank you. Hey, Peter. Sunny Davenport, 510 26th Avenue, Vero Beach, Florida. My question on the ALS is, have you considered whether or not, and estimated by, how much the Uber drivers are taking people now to the emergency room and how that will affect the ALS going forward?
No, and John's not here, but I would say in an emergency situation, I would not want to be with an Uber driver. If I'm in a situation where I need emergency care,
I agree.
I would want an ALS ambulance crew taking me to a hospital
I
rather
would too.
rather than an Uber driver.
However, on PBS at 7 o'clock last night, they had a special on people that were taking Uber if they didn't feel it was life-threatening, but it was an emergency, i.e. the flu.
And that's something we'll have to take into consideration. Obviously, our year-to-date revenue doesn't bear that out.
Not yet.
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
but no, that's a good point, and
It's a
we'll
possibility.
have to monitor that as we move forward. Again, we do tend to budget conservatively and that revenue source is not as dependable as others because obviously
Right.
it's dependent upon people calling you for service. So,
Right.
That's something, but
And not only Uber, but who else is now here in town that's doing driving? Begins with an L.
Lyft.
Eh? Lyft.
Lyft. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so between the two of them, it could have an influence down the line.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll watch. Thank you.
All right, Michael, again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will move on to utility services. Item 1 is a sole source purchase of 21 870 megahertz scan handheld radios. Good morning again, Vinny.
Good morning. For the record, Vincent Burke, Director of Utility Services. As part of the migration from the analog to the digital radio system, staff is bringing this to the board for approval to seek sole source purchase of 21 870 megahertz digital radio systems. We've outlined some of the potential costs associated on the agenda item. This has been approved in our budget item. And I know that the EMS folks and the emergency services folks are already transitioning to the digital radio system. Utilities is as well. We're working with Affirm Communications International. The price quotation is attached in the backup. And also, I believe Public Works will be also transitioning to the new 800 megahertz system. So staff would like to recommend that the Board of County Commissioners waive the requirements for bids and authorize the purchasing department to issue a purchase order to Communications International for the purchase of 21, what they're calling P25 radios at a cost of $31,937.22. Staff also recommends that the board authorize the trade-in of the 20 radios that will be replaced as part of this purchase, as well as other potential 800 megahertz radios owned by either the county utility department or other departments like Public Works as they replace their products over the phase conversion, which is a multi-phase process. Rather than do it in 1 year, we're looking to do this over several years. Finally, staff recommends that the board authorize the purchasing manager to issue a purchase order as approved by the budget department for the remainder of the replacement radios. Again, we're trying to do this over a multi-year process. We have this initial phase that was approved in fiscal year 17-18 budget, and we're looking for the sole source approval from the board. I'm available if there are any questions.
Thank you, Vinny. Commissioners, any questions of staff?
Just one short one, Vinny. The P25s have the built-in GPS, I think, component in it where you can look and see where employees are stationed and working. That's one of the kind of the built-in features of that. I know we have the vehicle tracking that we're using, and I think we talked about it once before. Is there a way to integrate the two of those? So if you want to see who's closest to a water main break or a emergency service call, you can get a quick snapshot of who's where. But for those of you who haven't been to the Harris P25 program that they do, I think twice a year up in Brevard, there's a lot of great features in this new system that we're going to have for the community.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, to your point, Commissioner, we do use a program right now, which is another third-party program. It's a web-based unit that can track not only things like the whereabouts, but speed, position, and some other safety measures. And so we're working with Public Works to increase the number of licenses that they have. It's through a different party than Communications International. And we had felt during the research, based on the initial questions, to stick with that web-based platform that we have in place, not only for our fleet vehicles, but some of our heavy equipment for emergency purposes that we can designate it to the north or south part of the campus, or I'm sorry, the community. Especially when we have things like hurricanes, we're able to use that and kind of direct folks as quickly as possible. So that's a good point.
Mr. Spirka.
Rich Berger, Public Works. Yeah, Vinny and I have been working on this radio issue. We met with the radio supplier. The GPS is available at a cost, and we're currently analyzing the cost to the system we use to what the radio GPS would use and the software that it would take. So we're looking into those costs, but it's a feature that's in the radio. All we need to do is activate it. Again, it's a cost per unit.
Right.
Thank you, Rich. Commissioners?
I just had one quick question for Vinny. As we're going through this over the next few years, during the transition, there'll be no loss of serviceability or communication between all of the end users?
Correct. Yes. Our intent is to phase it out so that we can do it in a way that makes the most sense for us and our fleets out there. We have some radios that are tied to trucks. In this case, we're using some that are handheld radios to that new standard. The price has come down than what we had initially anticipated, so Communications is working with us to make sure that we have these radios, don't have any loss of service, and we continue to the new platform that they're rolling out.
And a decision has not been made to activate the GPS yet?
Not yet, but we'll work with Public Works to
we do have the
nail down those
identification.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Fleischer.
Move staff's recommendation
Second.
for a sole source provider.
We have a motion by Commissioner Fleischer, second from Commissioner Adams. Is there any comment from the public on the motion before us? Mr. Johnson, please come up to the podium. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody enjoyed the football game.
Rich really enjoyed it. He's over there just celebrating away.
I'm not an opponent of sole source procurement. If this is some super unique kind of system, sole source is affable with it. It's not clear to me what the purpose of importance of this procurement being sole source and not going out for multiple source. So I'd like to have a further explanation of that if I could.
I can give a brief explanation of that. There are a couple of different providers of 800 megahertz radio systems. We use a Motorola-based system. If you went out for bid and got one of the others, the radios wouldn't work with the transmission system that we have. So you kind of get married to one provider. We've had a great experience with the provider that we have, Communications International. I think it's saved us a significant amount of money over the last couple of decades. There are some other providers out there where you're replacing radios and equipment far more often than you are here. So basically, once you've picked your radio system, you've got a very limited choice in what you can use for radios.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Fletcher.
And again, Mr. Johnson, I appreciate your concern, and I do share that as far as sole source providing. But we can look back at some of the constitutionals who have had to make purchase decisions that needed serviceability and compatibility and alignment and seamless transition for delivery of service to the citizens, and that has to be taken into consideration. I think there was a few constitutionals that ran into some heavier costs until they brought it back into the same sole source. So sometimes the source providers are not available. Sometimes they leave the business or they're no longer servicing the area. So we have to be careful when we make a decision that is, well, the citizen is at the other end of the information or of the devices that we're looking at. But thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the motion before us? Seeing none, commissioners, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries 4-0. Commissioners, we're close to 10:30, but we're also very close to the end of the agenda. Is it your all's desire to keep going? Everybody good with that? Very good.
Well, Bob's not here. You know.
We will now take the second item under utility services, and this is a resolution to allow the installation of a temporary hose bib assembly for new construction. And again, Mr. Burke, welcome again.
All right, thank you. Not sure how to get rid of that Dell support assistant. All right, good, went away. Again, for the record, Vincent Burke, Director of Utility Services. We have a short presentation to walk you through what's been happening out in the real world. There's been some tampering with utility connections. These are happening within the residential communities where new homes are being constructed. I don't know if there's any malicious intent. I think there's just a desire to get the work done. We're finding curb stops, which is the on-off switch for our water supply. Locks are being removed and connections are made directly into the public water supply, bypassing the meter and in some cases the check valve, double detector check valve. So this is a big issue for the safety of the public water supply. If there's pressure differentials, chemicals, paint, or some other things, there could be an issue of that getting into the public water supply. So we have just a few slides here showing what we found out there. You can see our nice meter that's been just shoved to the side. You got a straight hose connected to the water supply with no check valve in place. Here's our curb stop. This is on off. The lock's been tampered with, and then there's been an adapter piece tied in for a hose assembly. This one is our meter sitting in a puddle of who knows what. You have our corp stop. You have a hose bib tied over here. Here's a meter box somewhere in the grass, but certainly our meter's just bypassed to, tie right into the system. Here's a hose connector with what looks like a Schedule 40 fitting adapter tied to the service connection. Here's our meter box sitting out here on the dirt that was in the way, and then you have some houses that are being built in that vicinity. At least they got this one up out of the water. We have our corp stop, no meter, no check valve, and then a hose bib assembly that's tied right to our system.
That's fancy.
This one, again, meter, check valve been removed. This was this year, recently, at one location. We have a hose that's submerged in water. You have a hose bib assembly here, and it's hard to tell in this picture, but you have this hose that's tied to an adapter piece that tied right into our water system. So this was found on a routine inspection. We did not go looking for this, and we immediately worked with the building department to try to shut that work down until this could get resolved. This is another location, a different part of the town, where there's been 5 homes that are built. Miraculously, not one drop of water has been used for consumption, or at least that's what we thought until we saw. This is a straight pipe that actually comes with a pre-plumbed service box. So at least there's a check valve, which is this part right here. But this straight pipe has no meter in place. They have not called for a meter, and yet we see 5 homes that are built. This is just one home. Typically, the water is needed for concrete, for stucco work, and or painting. And then you can see the hose that's lying on the ground that was connected to this box. And then just as of yesterday, in fact, we found same company that was found initially in the beginning of January, again, with tampering. There's no check valve here, and there's no protection of the public water supply. Missing the check valve, at least the meter's in place. Sometimes we don't find the meter, sometimes we do, but certainly that's why we're here today. So Indian River County Code 201.26 says it shall be illegal and subject to punishment provided herein for any person to maliciously, willfully break, damage, destroy, uncover, deface, or tamper with any structure, appurtenance, or equipment which is part of the county water and or sewage system. As we noted in the agenda, there's one bad actor. I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of folks that do good work in the county. We never hear from them. But we obviously are drawing attention to the ones that are either not following the rules or just trying to get the work done quickly. Fines do not seem to be arresting or slowing down this work, as one person that we found early in the year is subject to, again, being found as of yesterday. We have some show and tell. For those folks that are not able to see this, we typically have our residential check valve system here and our meter in place. We have our on-off switch, which is the corp stop. This is a 90-degree turn. In some cases, it's been pin locked. Guys have gone in there and cut our pin lock to get water service. In some cases, they remove the meter, they remove the protection of the public water supply, they discard that as shown in some of the pictures, and they hook right up to the corp. And that's what we're trying to prevent. And so what staff has done is to come up with something that is in use in another part of Florida, where we propose to have this standpipe assembly that would, in essence, come outside the box after the check valve, after the meter has been installed, and have a riser system either through some sort of metal unistrut or through some sort of stake system to give it rigidity, and to have the hose bib assembly. There's a Watt anti-siphon. This is basically like a one-way so that water is allowed to come out. I know that the building department official has said that some of these are sometimes a pain to work with, but it's just another protection device so that you don't have anti-siphoning or material coming back into the water system. So we'd recommend to have this 3/4-inch Watts anti-siphon device on the hose bib. And this hose bib assembly would then allow the plumber, whomever, to basically hook to the hose. The meter would be in place. The check valve would be in place. That's to prevent any nasty stuff from getting back into the water system if there's pressure differential. And this would be outside the box. Another advantage to this is Schedule 80. It's hard to see it from where you're at, but the wall thickness on this is a lot thicker than your Schedule 40 white PVC. It provides a more rigid connection. We would then allow the plumber to cut this in place. The meter assembly would reside with the builder, and they would be able to tie into a more rigid connection outside the meter box to then serve the customer. We've had some cases where, I'm not saying all cases, where the male threaded Schedule 40 piece does not have the same thickness as Schedule 80, and it tends to settle or break off. And we've had a lot of breaks after the meter, and then, customers are looking to us to help adjust the bill or to come up with some sort of solution if a lot of water is used. So we would like to recommend that there's a little picture here that was in the backup. The water comes in the corp stop, meter, check valve, and then this apparatus, which would be installed outside the box, above grade, that would allow folks to tie in to be able to get water. The cost for this is $35. We're not making any money. We're just covering the cost to secure the material, put it together, and then put it in place when the meter is connected. We have modified our policy. I think there was somebody from the building community that said in the past that we typically would not allow the meter to be requested until the form boards are up. And a lot of times they need that water sooner rather than later. This addresses that issue. We would be able to, when the building permit is issued, install that meter and put this apparatus in place to allow them to have that water sooner rather than later, which is something that's been requested of us a couple times. So we actually had modified that policy in November 2017. I can share that with the board versus the old policy that was from 2016 that required the form board to be in place prior to the issuance of the meter. $35, we're looking to have this cost borne by those installing the apparatus. There was another member of the building community that made a great point that our drawing, which was just for illustration purposes on notes 3 and 4 on your backup, denoted developer shall do this. Well, really, the construction folks are going to be doing this, not the developer. It'd be the person pulling the building permit. So we could modify that language or drawing to say whoever is requesting the meter, whether or not it's a resident or if it's the builder, not necessarily the developer. So apologies for that confusion, but certainly staff would recommend to adopt the proposed resolution, which is in the backup, indicating that this apparatus would be installed when the new meter is requested, again, prior to the form boards being in place. That would accelerate them getting water, but still provide the protection for the public water supply, which unfortunately is everybody's busy, and folks are looking for water. So certainly available for any questions that the board may have at this time.
Commissioners?
None at this time.
Couple things. One is, so our staff would go out to install the meter, is that correct? Wouldn't we want to go ahead and install that at the same time?
And we would, yep, and we would do that. We'd have the check valve, we'd have the meter, and we'd have that stamp pipe outside the box staked off.
Okay, so just be an additional $35 on the
Yes.
building permit application to cover the cost of that.
Yes.
But our crews would be installing it.
Yep, and then we would know, anybody that's using water would have, whether or not it's our inspectors, or whether or not it's the building department, or even with Public Works, if anybody's using water, they should see this assembly tied to any new construction.
Okay. And then, I don't know, either for Vinny or Dylan, it seems to me it's crazy that this is going on and the fines aren't sufficient to deter this use, but it's putting the public water supply at risk. I guess two things is, one is we can wait and see if this is, corrects the problem and it's not a problem going forward, or do we need to start looking at revising our code and providing for a much stiffer penalty to really be a deterrent here? Because it just seems like right now that the fine is just the cost of doing business for them to break into our water supply. And so, I'd be willing to look at, what can we do to really put some teeth into it to stop this? Because I think this is a pretty bad practice that's threatening the public water supply.
Commissioner, under Florida statutes, there are certain amounts that can be handed out for violations. The board does have the authority to approve an ordinance that would actually bump it up to a much higher number. That, again, as I said, has to be done by ordinance. So certainly if the board wished, we could certainly draft an ordinance, bring it back to the board for consideration. It would be the board's discretion as to when to consider that.
Okay. So Vinny, if we approve this today, we start now, we'll slowly be getting these out there, but we still have a lot of potential. I know there's a lot of construction. There's probably a lot of potential meters out there still at risk, or so.
Yeah, again, this would just be for new construction and new requests, but certainly there's a lot of activity that's going on right now.
Yeah. I'd be willing to ask staff to bring something back for us to look at sooner rather than later, but see how my other commissioners feel. And
what is the current fee or penalty structure?
Yeah, it's a $500 fine. It's the usual code enforcement style. Now, additionally, there is a penalty of, I believe within the code, and Vincent may have cited it in his presentation, there's sort of a kind of 3 times the amount, you'll get charged 3 times the amount of the water that you use. But again, if these are folks who've connected and we don't even have a meter on it, we're kind of guessing at the amount of water they've used. So that's another enforcement mechanism.
And I'm in favor of looking at how we fix this, and this may be a solution. I think there's probably some other folks that have some comments to make. But the only way, just from a reality standpoint, the only way you could interfere or cause a problem with our water supply system is the water supply system would have to be at a 0 or negative pressure to take something backwards from an illegal connection, which would mean we have a catastrophic system failure to have a negative pressure on a line.
Or a contractor hits our line, we lose pressure, and
right.
now typically it's 20 PSI or below is what DEP
right.
for a certain period of time. You could have that occur. Not to say that it occurs all the time, I think we've been
right.
lucky, but certainly that's a possibility.
Sure. They have gotten crafty in their ways to bypass. We always just did a temporary hose bib and did this decades ago, but there's other people that don't look at it that way. But be curious to hear some of the comments from some of the folks.
So there's probably no statute of limitation on those fines, is there, Dylan?
Oh, I never did that.
I thought I just heard you say we did that all the time.
No. We put the hose bib arrangement that he's proposing was our standard setup.
Okay. Commissioner Fleischer.
Former builder. Yes. Mr. Chairman, thank you. When you look at, I rather see the builders in a far more positive light. As they're going forward, they need water before the form boards. They need water from day one. And, they're compelled to either bring a tank of water and have a pump, knock on a neighbor's door if it's available, use a garden hose, give them a little bit of funding for the use of their water, and go forward. Or be creative and become plumbers extraordinaire. So if that's the case, I believe this resolves a greater concern. And I have spoke to some of the builders, and all they want is the opportunity to be able to get water before the folks are in the home. And it's a very difficult concept, and I believe that this opens up the door to entice those that don't have to be brought before the board for a violation. They'll just be hooking up. And those standpipes are reusable, correct?
They are, yes, but we would have it so that the builder would own that. They could do whatever they want after they're connected to the system.
So now the cost factor is just permit and of course, the usage.
Yep.
And I believe that's going to curtail a whole lot. I think you have to look at this as in the picture of somebody wants to get the home purchaser in the building as quickly as possible. And this delays maybe 2 to 3 weeks in the beginning before the form board can be established, and they're scrambling for water as they are in a third world nation. So I'm happy to move staff recommendation.
We have a motion by Commissioner Fleischer for staff recommendation. And second from Commissioner Adams. Under discussion, is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak to this? Come on up, Joe.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Joseph Paladin, President of Black Swan Consulting, also President of Atlantic Coast Building. I support staff on this. Now that they've cleared up the wording on the developer being responsible or the builder being responsible, I think the clarity, I support that 100%. The only other thing I would indicate is if it's the same people reoccurring offenses, I think we ought to consider that being a much stiffer penalty, and even maybe complaining to the state certification of licensing. If it's the same people over and over, you got the same few people over and over making offenses, and there's no reason for everybody to be penalized for the same couple of people that are doing it. But I support staff 100% on this.
Thank you. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Chuck Meckling, 5070 North A1A, and I too support staff. Also want to make a comment that Mr. Burke was very open. We had discussed this before the meeting. I appreciate the clarification to the concept that he who's pulling the permit or the contractor would be responsible for putting it back the way it should be. Appreciate the concept of water gotten sooner than later. And certainly those that are violating this should not be allowed to do so, and hope this is a measure to make that take place. But I want to say that the utility staff's been very helpful in discussing these items that they're bringing forth, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chuck, I see that you were very attentive to the pictures that Vinnie was showing. That was the first time you've seen anything like that, right?
Well, it was, it came out Friday morning when we had the, agenda packet, so it was in there. And so, the way the commission has moved to have displays of all the items in the new agenda packets has been very helpful, too, to review things. But
I meant actually the plumbing applications that people engineered to
well, no,
procure
as
water.
Mr. Zork says in the past, on job sites that we had temporary bibs like that, and, like's being discussed, that people have gotten creative in a negative way with that tending to get water.
Thank you, Chuck. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak from the public? Deb, are you okay? Okay.
Sounds good.
That was a thumbs up from Ms. Robinson.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, I have
Dylan wants
one
to make
other
sure the
question
record reflects everything.
for Vinnie.
Yeah, Commissioner Zork.
To provide pressurization to the building when they're in the top-out phase, instead of having a 90 for the riser, if that was a T where the plumber could connect onto that, so when they actually have to pressure check the lines inside, they wouldn't have to disconnect the hose bib, that a 90 or a T would just give them the flexibility of going when they go ahead and do the top-out and they want to go ahead and pressurize the system to make sure they don't have any leaks or, nail holes in any of the pipes. That would give them the flexibility to do that.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is coming off of this 90,
Right.
we would have a little isolation valve and then an ability for the plumber
Right, or it
to
could
be able
just
to
be a
tie it.
stub out with a cap on it, and if they want to connect onto it, they would cut the cap off and then connect on the rest of the way. It would give them flexibility.
Yep. Okay.
Thanks.
So Vinnie, you're okay with that?
Yep. The only thing is they'd be having to turn the water off, obviously, at the corp stop to be able to make that connection. So
Right.
we'll have to work with them on that, but we can add that piece to that and just put a blind cap on the end of it.
If, I put it this way, if somebody thinks it's beneficial, if it's not, leave it off, but
Okay, good point.
You want to go ahead and modify your motion and include the,
well, I got a
I got
a nod and a no, so I'll leave it up to,
Yeah, why don't we work with folks to see, whether to do the T or leave it at the 90.
okay.
If you
It
just
might
give us that
compel folks
flexibility.
to do some altering. I understand that the 90 PSI has to be sustained for a period of time and then inspected to ensure that the plumbing is all worthy, and I believe the team takes a look at that and signs off, correct? So I don't know if we give them an opportunity to charge up the household, then, water does not hold the same pressure as air, and it might interfere with the entire process.
Right.
That's just
sure.
Vinnie?
So just for
fifth grade science.
Sorry. Just for my clarification, I know the motion is for staff recommendation, but is there also directive for staff to look at an ordinance modification to our current code, or is that something that we should do at some other point in time?
It's not part of the current motion.
no.
I would like to see it be part of it, but
I wasn't sure.
What would you like added to that, Mr. Chairman?
to ask the county attorney to bring back, or staff to bring back a proposed ordinance modification to beef up the penalties for tampering with a water supply connection.
I think that this action is going to compel folks to be far more compliant than we perceive. It's a low-cost action and a high output action, but I have no qualms of adding that to the motion to ensure that staff has the opportunity to see if we can beef up the fees and penalties.
Okay, is the second?
And what we see is maybe a graduated fine if you have a repeat
Yeah.
offender, kind of like the vacation rentals or with false alarms, you know,
Sure.
first one, maybe there's.
Absolutely, yeah. If it's repeated offenses, then we should really hammer it down, so. All right, so we have the motion for staff recommendation with the modification to have staff come back with a proposed ordinance change on the enforcement of tampering with the water supply, and that motion's by Commissioner Flesher, second from Commissioner Adams. Is there any final public comment on this matter before us?
I actually have a question.
Okay, and go ahead, Ms. Davenport, come up.
Okay, just procedurally, would the board like the county attorney's office to bring back a proposed ordinance, have the board review it, and then us go out for advertising, or would you like us simply to draft the ordinance, put it out for a public hearing, and then set the public hearing here? I just want to make sure if you want to see something first before hearings are scheduled.
I think we should see something before hearings.
Yes, and I think we'll have this intact. We're moving forward. We're getting water in the hands of the builders and developers.
And I think we could run it by the Development and Permit Review Process Committee as well. And
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We had kind of gone here because of the public water supply issue, but it might be something, if we're going to look at the fines, we should run that through the Development Review Committee, because we've got some more time there.
That sounds great. So we'll run it through the committee, bring it to the board, get the board to decide, yes, that's what we want to do, and then we'll advertise.
Perfect.
Thank you for the clarification.
Davenport, did you want to come up?
Hi, good morning. I'm in full agreement with this gentleman here. I think a $500 fine is just the cost of doing business. We make a $5,000 fine, they're going to start thinking seriously about whether or not to follow the law or not. So if you're going to break the law, it's going to cost you. And if they're going to jeopardize the water treatment system, then they need to pay for it, because other people are going to be paying for it. That's all I have to say, but you're right on with that.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Okay, and the clerk and the attorney are clear on the motion? I'm getting nods, okay. Commissioners, all in favor signify with aye.
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 Any opposed? That carries 4-0. We're going to go ahead and take a brief break right now. It's 10:52. We will be back at 11 o'clock. Back to order. We have now completed all the departmental matters. Takes us to the county attorney matters, and the first item is an Economic Development Council appointment. Mr. Reingold, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. The real estate industry representative position on the EDC is vacant, and we've had one application to fill that position. That is from Tim Borden. Simply, the county attorney's office respectfully requests that the board consider this applicant and the application and determine whether they would like to appoint this applicant to fill the vacant position of real estate industry representative on EDC. And with that, I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Dylan. Commissioners?
I move we appoint Mr. Borden to the vacant seat.
Second?
We have a motion by Commissioner Adams, second by Commissioner Zork to appoint Mr. Borden. I will just make a comment under consent agenda or information items. We have two other openings on the Economic Development Council. One is for a citrus industry representative, and one is for a at-large BCC appointee. So we do have two other additional openings after we do fill this one on the real estate side. So is there any public comment on the motion before us? Seeing none. Commissioners, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 4-0.
Thank you very much.
Second item is permission to advertise for amendment to land development regulations, Indian River County Code, Section 913, removing title insurance companies from certifying title on the final plats. Good morning, Mr. DeBrawl.
Good morning, Commissioners. Bill DeBrawl on behalf of the County Attorney's Office. One of the important steps in the platting process is title certification. The title certification process for the plat assures lot buyers that they're buying a lot with clear title that has been examined by either a title company or a Florida licensed attorney. In the past, those were required to be certifications on the part of either of those two entities. In 2017, the legislature changed the platting statute and eliminated the ability for a title insurance company to certify the title. What they did instead is they permitted a title company to issue what they called a property information report. A property information report is little more than an ownership and encumbrance report, O&E. It is the barest form of title work that you could order and is also the most inexpensive. Of further concern, two other notes that I'd make as far as the change in the statute. They limited the liability of a title insurance company as far as if a mistake would be made. The liability is limited to the amount of the fee that the title company received for the property information report. So if you, and the danger in a platting situation is you take a big piece of property, and if it has a title defect on it, you slice it up into smaller parcels of property, and then that title defect, if it is not detected, continues on to affect perhaps dozens of lot owners that bought in this subdivision. And so the second area of concern in the limitation of liability is that liability is limited only to persons named on the property information report. So an innocent purchaser that bought a lot with a title defect on it would basically have absolutely no recourse against the title company to try and fix the problem. What staff has recommended and what staff has done in researching this matter is we first met and first made the presentation to the Development Review Committee. It was thought at that time it'd be a good idea to talk to some folks around the area, an engineer, an attorney, a banker, and get their idea on their take of making a change to our code. So we had a meeting in early January with Chris Russell from Okalana Bank, Chris Marine from Gould Cooksey, and also we met with Steve Moeller from Masteller and Moeller along with staff. They were unanimous in their feeling that we should go with an amendment to the code that would provide only for attorneys, Florida licensed attorneys, to certify the title. That is something that's permissible according to 177, which is the platting statute. You can see in the backup that 177 is designed by the legislature to be a minimum set of rules to apply to a plat, and that communities are free to make more stringent requirements in the plat. So we're well within our rights to go ahead and do something like this as far as only have a Florida licensed attorney certify the plat on the title. We made a presentation on January 17th to the Development Review Committee. One of the issues that they raised was the issue of cost. If we only have an attorney certifying the title, would the cost go up for the developer? We discussed it. We learned that usually the attorney is involved early in the acquisition process as far as the property is concerned when the property is being purchased. The attorney is familiar with the different mortgage documents and deed restrictions, covenants, because that attorney has been, again, involved in the process from the very beginning. Also, as far as now the attorney is going forward to certifying title, yes, it probably will be more expensive to have an attorney spend the time necessary to certify the title, but the insurance that, or the assurance that you would get with a attorney certification would be malpractice insurance behind the attorney if something blows up, a very willing participant to solve the problem as far as the attorney that had been overseeing this project, and also the individual homeowners would now have a remedy if there was a title defect on the lot that they purchased. So staff's recommendation and the Development Review Committee's recommendation is twofold. Number one, to go ahead and go forward with an ordinance amendment that would have only Florida licensed attorneys being able to certify a plat in Indian River County, the unincorporated area of Indian River County, and secondly, enact the pending ordinance document or doctrine so that any plats in the queue that are currently under review or that may come in as this process winds its way through Planning and Zoning Commission and the advertising process, that they would have to use a Florida licensed attorney to certify the title on the plat. If you would have any questions, I would be happy to try and answer them, but thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And with the pending ordinance doctrine, this would be effective as of today.
That's
the
correct.
board approves this. Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions of staff?
One, Bill, just to guess, in the last 10 years, how many plats have been platted and then title defects have come up and haunted? I just don't know how prevalent it is, because I know people try to be pretty thorough because that's the last thing you want to have happen, because then it has a domino effect.
I can think of a couple that have had boundary issues and property issues that have come up. They've been small, so thankfully that has been easily remedied, but it does happen.
And then what is so when an attorney registers in the state of Florida, what's their minimum E&O or professional liability insurance? What do they carry that? It's usually who the firm is and the person is who's going to step up and fix something, not necessarily their insurance if they don't fix it.
There's no requirement for malpractice insurance, but if an attorney wants to go ahead and practice property law, most of the time they will associate themselves with Attorney's Title Fund or Old Republic or something like that, and those folks would require some sort of malpractice insurance before they would go ahead and offer their services available to the attorney.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioners?
Quick question, Bill. There were some requests from the clerk's office. Is this incorporated in this, or is that going to be a separate issue?
That is going to be a separate issue. There were some other things that the clerk's office wanted to do as far as bring the platting, the actual mechanics of the plat, the box where the OR book and page appears and things like that, that we're going to bring along with the other ordinance amendments that the Development Review Committee is going to look at this month.
Well, I think staff would like us to vote this up or down.
Move staff recommendation.
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion from Commissioner Fleischer, second by Commissioner Adams. Does anybody from the public wishes to speak on this item before us? Mr. Paladin.
Thank you again. Joseph Paladin again, President of Black Swan, also Vice Chair of the Advisory Committee. I support staff 100% on this. Just just having the title company be responsible for the amount of the fee gives us no teeth at all in going forward. It gives me no security as a developer. After spending millions of dollars for a piece of property, I want some assurance that what I've approved and gone forward with my money is going to be secure. So I support staff 100%. I think this is a good idea. And the pending ordinance I'm very familiar with, and I support that part too.
Great, thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
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 Any opposed? That carries 4-0. There are no county commissioner matters. Takes us to special districts and boards. Under the solid waste disposal district, we have the minutes of the meeting of December 19, 2017, and January 9, 2018. If anyone would like to make a
Mr.
motion.
Chairman, move recommendation to approve the meeting December 19, 2017, and the meeting of January 9, 2018 minutes.
I'll second that. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 4-0. Item 3, approval of amendment number 1 to the yard waste processing and disposal services. I guess, Vinnie, this is just to extend the agreement with Mr. Mulch for the yard waste?
This is just a timing issue. When Mr. Mulch started their contract April 1st of 2017, the CPI indicator to compare last year to this current year was based upon the April to April time period. Due to the fact that the CPI comes out after April 30th, all we're looking to do is to shift or modify the time to submit the CPI request to June 1st of the calendar year in which the request is being asked. So staff is looking for the board to amend the existing agreement, amendment number 1 with Mr. Mulch, just to shift the time period in which to request the CPI increase, if applicable, to June 1st of the year in which they would like that rate adjustment to take place.
Great. Thank you, Vinnie. Commissioners?
This is just shifting the time frame?
That's all it is just that provision for the timing in the contract from what it was to June 1st. Yeah.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Adams, second by Commissioner Zork for staff recommendation. Any comment from the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 4-0. There being no further business to conduct today, we will go ahead and be adjourned.